introduce. And I didn't introduce myself, but my name is Jenny. I am the Membership Services Associate, she, her, here at Plexus. And if you're interested in membership at Plexus, or you are a member and have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. But here with us today, we have the folks from Equality Ohio, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that advocates for full equality for the LGBTQ community. Our first speaker is Maria Bruno Esquire, she, they, joined Equality Ohio in August 2021 as the Public Policy Director. She leads EO's policy strategy at the local, state, and federal level. Throughout her career, Maria has utilized her legal education and community organizing background to address systemic problems through smart public policy and practical systemic solutions. Maria has been an advocate with the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, America Votes, and the ACLU of Ohio, and has worked on public policy issues ranging from civil rights to affordable housing to criminal justice reform. She was born and raised in Medina, Ohio, earned a BA from the University of Pittsburgh and a JD from the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. Maria began community organizing in college and continues to work with a diverse array of local organizers and advocates in Columbus on civil rights and anti-poverty issues. Maria also serves on the Cleveland Votes Advisory Board. Our second speaker is Mary Zaller, she, her, hers, serving as the development consultant for Equality Ohio and working with the business community on the Ohio Business Competes Coalition, as well as on sponsorship. Mary has worked in the LGBT community in Cleveland and Ohio since 2003 and is a strong advocate for social justice and systemic change. Previously, she worked in the broadcast and special effects industry in Europe and Los Angeles. Mary is a Cleveland native and resides in Ohio City with her wife, who is also named Mary. We're so happy to have you both here today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Maria. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to dive right in. Thank you for that introduction. I'm Maria Bruno, she, her, or they, them pronouns. I'm the Public Policy Director at Equality Ohio. And I'm going to talk about all of the legislative things that have been happening around the country and in the state in particular. It's a doozy. It usually is when we're talking about this stuff right now. So I know that it's heavy, and basically how we're going to set this up is I'm going to run through the presentation, as is Mary, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A where we can, talk a little bit of just general reactions and things that you want more information on based on what you just heard. So next slide, please. Many of you are probably familiar with Equality Ohio, but we have a few different buckets of work. So it's helpful, I think, to, just understand where we are in the ecosystem here. We have Statehouse and agency advocacy, which is often what you will see as our front-facing stuff. You'll hear me quoted in the paper a lot and on the news. That's because that is the bulk of what we are known for, but we also have really important public education programming, field work, including municipal policy work. So non-discrimination protections, sorry, my cat has decided to join the presentation, municipal policy work, as well as increasingly reacting to local incidents at a local level when that makes sense. We also have a legal clinic for LGBTQ Ohioans up to 300% the poverty line. Next slide, please. And we also work for the legal and lived equality. We know that, there's one thing to have legal protection, but that's only so good as how it actually exists in your community and day-to-day life. So we work for both, and we are not done until both are accomplished. Next slide, please. This is the number for our legal clinic. If you'd like to get any of our services, you can put in a referral. If we are not able to represent you, we try to refer you out to someone who can. So I encourage you to contact us there. Next slide. And then just a little bit about LGBTQ plus people in Ohio right now. They are an increasingly large portion of our workforce, 460, and oh my God, that's such a big number. Nearly 500,000. Sorry, everyone. It's been you will understand by the end of this PowerPoint why I am so tired. But nearly 500,000 LGBTQ Ohioans, 5% of our workforce, and 30% of LGBTQ plus people in the state are raising families. We know that younger people increasingly identify as LGBTQ. We know that younger people are motivated by LGBTQ rights when they're making both their economic decisions as well as their political ones. Next slide, please. So we have lots of policies and laws that are currently impacting our population. I'm sure you've seen headlines related to this. Next slide. Nationally, there are nearly 900, probably by the time that this presentation has happened, we are probably up to 900 anti-LGBTQ bills just since the beginning of this calendar year. So in less than 6 months, we have faced this many bills, and it's just been an absolute onslaught. I think we are at 21 states that have sports bans for trans youth athletes. I think 21 states have bans on gender affirming healthcare for trans youth. It is a brutal time to be an LGBTQ person in this country right now, and Ohio is no exception. Next slide, please. These are the main bills in Ohio that we follow. There are others that I will mention. It'll be overwhelming, and I'm sorry. There are a lot, but these are the ones where we are really the sort of sole target of. So there are a lot of, for example, education bills that we monitor, care about, advocate around, do advocacy work, but follow the lead of a partner organization, whereas these are LGBTQ, anti-LGBTQ plus bills specifically. We have HB 6, which is the ban on trans student athletes. We have HB 8, which is the Unsafe Students Act. I'll talk about what all of these are. HB 68, which is our healthcare ban, and HB 113, which is Detransitioner Awareness Day. I don't even cover that one that much, so actually I'll just say the very little thing that I'll say, which is this is an attention grabber by the same person who sponsored HB 68. It is not that we don't want to acknowledge detransitioner individuals. They do exist. They have, unique, valuable, important stories to share. And that bill is chock full of misinformation that is very harmful to trans youth and gender nonconforming young people. So it's a little bit of a Trojan horse. So that is just one. I think it's mostly for show. We're not very worried about it, but that is one that we continue to monitor. The others, though, are actually being considered. The sports ban has actually passed through committee, and it could get a House vote as soon as this Wednesday. HB 8 is a very harmful bill. I'll talk about more in a second, but that, in theory, could have a committee vote soon. It's not scheduled for any hearings this week, but they could come. HB 68, we actually have opponent testimony this Wednesday. You have until tomorrow morning at 9 to submit. So if any of you all would like to submit comments, it is not too late. And you can contact me or Catherine, which is KATHRYN at equalityohio.org about any questions related to submitting testimony. Next slide, please. So I'll go through each briefly here. The first is the HB 6. You will hear it referred to as the Save Women's Sports Act. I will never call it that, but I will tell you that that's what it's called for the sake of being able to know when they're actually talking about this bill. So this is a full bill, or a full ban on transgender athletes in sports, all levels. So this goes from kindergarten through the end of college. All school sports, trans athletes would not be allowed to participate. More importantly, it creates a cause of action for athletes and for schools. And basically what it does is creates a direct conflict of law. This would be a state law that says, as a school within the state, you have to have a policy that prohibits trans athletes from participating in school sports. Title IX, federal law that regulates schools, says you have to have inclusive policies, and that includes for transgender students. So schools would get to pick between violating state or federal law. Then they would inevitably get sued, which is formally spelled out as an option in this bill. And athletic associations already have policies in place which would conflict with this. So it would also force them to either change their participation policies or be subject to legal action. So obviously we don't like this bill, and it could reach the House floor as soon as Wednesday. So it's still time to call your representative. This is going to be a matter of really, does the speaker decide this is something important enough to take up for a vote? If it goes to the vote, I'll be honest, I think it probably passes, and then we work on advocating in the Senate. But yeah, that's where we're at with that one. Next slide. Next is HB 8, which is the Unsafe Students Act. This is in the House Primary and Secondary Education Committee. This one is kind of tricky to explain. So because on its face, it doesn't sound unreasonable until you see how these have actually been applied in other states. It can seem reasonable. So the first thing is that it bans sexually explicit content and defines that as images or descriptions of images of sexual activity, something along those lines, which again sounds reasonable until you realize that in other states where this exact language has passed, that has actually been used as the justification for removing any piece of literature, curriculum, play that mentions a LGBTQ character. We have seen plays get canceled because of an allusion to one of the characters being gay. We have seen actual book bans. So this is the law that was used for the Florida pictures of the empty bookshelves. That was the law. In one state, librarians can go to jail for up to 30 days if they don't remove material that is defined by this. And there are several other states that have ridiculous actual consequences that have stemmed from that language. The second part is that school personnel would be obligated to disclose any change in mental or physical health for the kid or for their child. And again, facially kind of sounds reasonable until you realize that that is so vague that, in theory, let's say a child paints their nails. Some might say that that's a difference in someone's mental health care. Some might say it's very innocuous. Someone's interpretation of that term could decide whether that teacher is in violation of this law. And so it also, the former version of this bill was amended, and the initial version had a carve out that said if you were worried about a child's physical safety, then the professional could use their discretion in disclosing anything, which is a nice, reasonable safeguard. I mean, we still didn't love the language, but that at least allowed for those very exceptional circumstances where there was going to be a fear of physical violence, for example. The amendment took that language out and made it mandatory regardless. Doesn't matter. The chair of this committee was specifically asked, what about cases where you are concerned about child abuse? And he said, there are laws for that. They can call them afterwards and the parent can be prosecuted, which doesn't quite help prevent the harm from occurring in the first place. So we are very worried about this. This could go, that has not yet been voted out of committee, but it could at any time. Next slide, please. HB 68 is the SAFE Act. This is a total ban on gender affirming care for transgender youth. It bans providing gender affirming care from anyone under 18, including consultations and mental health services. So there is less explicitly banning language for mental health service in this one as the last round. But the problem is that if technically there might be circumstances in which mental health services would be allowed, the systems around which those mental health services are based would be so eroded that it would be inaccessible. So functionally, it really does still ban mental health services for young people in the context of gender affirming care. It also prohibits courts from denying or considering parental rights within the scope of how a parent's stance on gender affirmation. So long story short, if you forced your child to detransition and the other parent might be affirming, they could not use the fact that they are not affirming against that parent when considering custody. That is just a new addition from the last time. They really kind of added that in. But yeah, that was not in it last year. So that's a new addition. It also prohibits out-of-state referrals. So even if we had a total ban, a doctor couldn't even refer a patient to an out-of-state physician that does practice in that area, which is problematic for its own specific reason of that denies, the patient's care, but also from the ideological reason of banning the referral to another licensed professional feels very icky, just from like a, standard human behavior level. Bans banning conversion therapy. So I will, in a couple of slides, I'll talk about different ordinances that we've been able to help pass. Some of those have included bans on conversion therapy for young people. So talking kids out of being gay, talking kids out of being trans, within the context of youth mental health care, outside the context of religion, which does have specific exemptions. And then also there was a data tracking piece that is anonymized, but it's still problematic for a bunch of different reasons. One, the trans community is so small that you can only anonymize so much. Two, it still puts a target on doctors' backs who have already been targeted by activists who have sent doctors death threats and things for having a record of treating people with gender affirming care. So that is going to have an opposition testimony. So that's our side. We have until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to submit testimony. I encourage you to do so if you haven't already. I think that from this, this is actually the bill that makes families move. I mean, I have talked to a lot of parents of trans kids in the past couple years who have started looking other places because their child would be forced to detransition, and that's not an option for them. So this really is a circumstance of there are a lot of employees, not just even from a values perspective, from a logistical economic perspective, will not move to states that have these bans. And, of course, then there's the ideological fact of it's just cruel. And the fact that this is literally medical best practices. All major medical associations agree that gender affirming care is medical best practices, and this would ban that. So banning medical best practices, just like, from a through line thing, is always bad. I will, make that one of the hills I die on. Next slide, please. Okay. So we do push for good things too when we have the space. That hasn't been recently, I recognize. But the primary buckets are first HIV modernization. That's the concept of basically, actually, I'm going to talk about that in a couple of slides when I talk about the coalition that we work with. Ohio Fairness Act, that is the statewide non-discrimination protections that would be in the context of housing, employment, and public accommodation. We have been working on that for a decade. We continue to work on that. In the interim, we have lots of local ordinances that we've passed, but it's crucial for business, and it is crucial for our economy, and it's that common sense thing that we just continue to push for, and one day it will happen. And then protections against conversion therapy, as we just discussed, it is very harmful. And so we continue at the local level while we work on the state level, work on conversion therapy prohibitions. Next slide, please. These are some other more minor things that you might see that are important to us, but are less of the top headline making things. One, there's a lot of gendered code language in the Ohio Revised Code that complicates family law in a bunch of weird ways, like it's saying husband and wife versus spouse. That can, whether it's because of a same-sex relationship or because of non-stereotypical gender roles, whatever it might be, the gendered language is very problematic. So we continue to work on that. Conversion therapy ban, designate Pride Month, designate Coming Out Day, and our friend Senator Kent Smith has been working for years on getting us an Equality Ohio license plate. So that's a fun one as well. Next slide, please. Non-discrimination laws. We are one of 28 states without these. Sad face. We continue to work very hard to get them. And like I said, at the local level, we continue to work on that. Next slide. And these are all the local places that we have gotten coverage in the interim. Lots of places in Northeast Ohio. Kudos to the folks who have been working so hard on that. And you know, if you live in a place that has not yet gotten these protections in place at the local level and you think that there's a local appetite, you can reach out to Jen Scott, jen@equalityohio.org, and she's happy to get that conversation started. Next slide. Okay, and how you can help. Next slide. So like I said, if you're interested in starting a campaign for a non-discrimination ordinance, or you just want to talk through, you know, whether it's one that already exists and you're not sure how it works, or, you know, just, I don't know if there's an appetite for this, but I'm curious to find out, you know, happy to have that conversation. I would reach out to Jen. Next slide, please. We also have a lot happening at the school board level. We are a slim staff, and I will say, especially right now, we have multiple people out for family leave reasons, and you know, we are running a tight ship right now, which is all to say that while all of these local fires happen at the school board level, we really rely on local partners in helping to navigate those. We work with a coalition called Honesty for Ohio Education. It's us, NCAA, teachers unions, student groups, professors, social workers, unions, you know, lots of different groups. The list is vast and you can find it on their website. But that is where we go for school related things, even LGBTQ school related things. We work, like I said, really closely with them. So if you have something that pops up in local school districts, I actually encourage you to reach out to them first. We can be helpful in certain contexts, but those are very limited. So we rely on partners to just keep an eye on what's going on and also work within this coalition. Next slide, please. And yes, okay, I forgot I had this slide. So these are all of the groups that work with this coalition. So it's a very broad range, makes it very efficient. So if you are looking, and here's the thing, these are the organizers that'll show up in your community. So if you find out something's happening and you want to know where the organizers are, chances are the organizers in your area are probably working with some of these groups. And I think that these slides can be sent to you afterwards as well. So you can get a copy for any. Next slide. Okay, OHMM, this is the coalition that works on the HIV modernization stuff. So what does that mean? There are a certain category of offenses called status-based offenses. These are things that are the criminalization of merely having HIV. What that means in effect is, for example, it is a felony to donate an organ if you have HIV. They test organs for STDs, you know, diseases of all shapes and sizes before they utilize them in any way or actually accept them. So despite there being a quality control metric and the potential for innocent mistakes, this is still a felony level offense. Another example is if you were to get a loitering charge, that loitering charge goes from a misdemeanor to a felony if you also have HIV. Not if that in any way related to anything that you were doing, just having HIV. So there are a lot of circumstances that these are on the books from when you were, or when we had a lot worse understanding of the science of HIV and the transmission of HIV, and also frankly, much more prejudice around having HIV. And so we work to remove these laws from the books through proactive bills. So we are currently working with lawmakers trying to get a bill introduced this cycle that would update the language. Kim Welter from our team is amazing and leads this coalition work. So Kim at equalityohio.org is who you would contact if you wanted to get more involved. Next slide, please. If you're an attorney, you can volunteer with our clinic. That's super helpful. I will tell you, we have a very long wait list for our services, and we do as much as we can with the capacity that we have, but it's very limited. And I see now, as I'm looking at this slide, that the information of the next clinic is very outdated because it says April, but in my defense, I finished this PowerPoint an hour ago. So that's my bad. I'll have to look up when the next monthly check-in and for the legal clinic is, but you can sign up for our legal clinic at this email with Oliver looking, or you can contact our legal clinic. There's a website, there's a attorney referral page on our website where you can go sign up to be a part of that. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we also have notes of trans joy. This is something that we started at Pride last year, and it literally was sticky notes on whiteboards. We just thought it would be a fun activity for people at Pride Month to, on their way by our table, write a little nice thing to trans people and put it on the board. And so after every Pride, we had a whole big board, or several boards often, of sticky notes with nice messages. They then have now put those online. So we both collect those in person in Pride season events, and we also continue to collect them online. It's just a nice way to say nice things to a community that is constantly confronted with a lot of horrible political violence. Next slide, please. We also have advocacy nights. We do text banking, we do phone banking. We have lots of opportunities to basically regularly engage our community members. So if you all are on our email list, you might get a random text that's from our text bankers. And they do everything from remind us about action alerts, or just making sure people know what's going on. If, we sent our legislative scorecard around last year, we try to make sure that when we have resources and updates to share, that we spread those around. Next slide, please. And then we have the Queer Advocacy Coalition. So we used to have the Youth Advocacy Coalition, and then we found out that, like, most of the people coming to the meetings were in their 30s, and it just didn't really feel like a youth advocacy coalition. So we have graduated to being a Queer Advocacy Coalition. And this is pretty much it's a partnership between Kaleidoscope and us. It is an opportunity for LGBTQ advocates and community members to get together. We do skill training. So we will learn, how to do a new thing or how to use a new resource. We'll talk about legislative updates, and we'll just have time and space to kind of have brainstorming and some community sharing once a quarter. So it's not every month, it's not every week, it's just once a quarter. We all get around one table, share some skills, high level updates, and it's a great time. Next slide, please. Okay, and now I'm going to pass it to Mary, who's going to talk about Ohio Business Competes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Zaller, she, her pronouns, with Equality Ohio. And I am formerly the Development Director of Equality Ohio, and am now a development consultant for Equality Ohio. I'm so proud to be part of this organization. Ohio Business Competes is a coalition of 4 different organizations. It's a statewide coalition. And next slide, please. These are the 4 organizations. So it's Equality Ohio, HRC, the ACLU of Ohio, and Trans Ohio. And what Ohio Business Competes is simply a coalition of these organizations that advocate for businesses to sign on to say that they believe that Ohio is more competitive in business if we have full LGBTQ protections. So as Maria mentioned, we've been working on getting this, full LGBTQ protections passed in Ohio for over a decade. And we aren't there yet. We're, in multiple municipalities, but not statewide. So as I was listening to Maria, I was thinking how this makes Ohio so much less competitive than some of our neighboring states, literally less competitive in business, to bring businesses to Ohio. We have this non-friendly or antagonistic climate against a lot of our population. So what Ohio Business Competes does is we engage businesses to sign on to say, we believe that if everyone in Ohio has full protections, it's a better business environment. And there's really, you can't argue with that. There are statistics all, that prove that. So all it is, and this is what this is another thing of one of those, the under what you can do to help section, is if you're not already a member of Ohio Business Competes, the website is there at the bottom, ohiobusinesscompetes.org. And it is literally a 1-page with a sign on. You put in your contact information, your business's name, address, email, phone number, and upload your logo. That's it. And it is simply that. And we now have 1,354 businesses across the state of Ohio. We have at least one business in all of Ohio's 88 counties and 44 88 House districts and 44 Senate districts. And so we wanted to make sure we can have representation everywhere for that. And what it does also is it allows us to go to our legislators in Columbus and say, hey, look, look at all these businesses in your district that feel this is important. Do you care about business in your district? Do you care about making sure business people are happy so they stay? And the legislators are going to say yes. And then this is sort of how we try to utilize this information. So it's a very powerful tool. We have businesses on here, everybody from Eaton Corporation, the Cincinnati Reds, Nationwide, Huntington, KeyBank, many law firms and real estate organizations. I know there's some people on this call, on this meeting that have signed on, have their businesses signed on. There's also individual sole proprietors on this business, Joe's Dog Walking Service. It's all types of businesses qualify. So, and also nonprofits, hospital systems, universities, schools. These are all powerful ways that we can show the legislators that we have broad support. So that is what Ohio Business Competes is. And if you have any questions at all, you can write to me, email me at mary@equalityohio.org, or just go sign on to where it says right here, ohiobusinesscompetes.org. And that's all for Ohio Business Competes, I think. Are we ready for, oh, look, here we are, over 1,300 businesses. I forgot we had another slide, and there's some more businesses here that I didn't mention that are part of the coalition. You can see, including Johnny's Ice Cream, who doesn't want I think all the ice creams and all the big ice cream in all the states, parts of the state. Mitchell's in Northeast Ohio is a member, Jenny's is a member, and I think it's the one in Cincinnati. So everybody loves Handles.
Greater.
Whatever, no, Graders. I think they are as well. If they're not, we need to go after them. It's funny, there's a lot of businesses that would be on it if we just had time to ask them all. But again, as Maria said, we have a slim staff, so we don't always have a chance to ask everyone. So more call for volunteer in that sense. But we thank you so much for your time and attention. And I think that we are going to turn it over to questions. Oh, here's a slide about questions. And we'll be sending these slides to everyone as well.
Thank you so much for all of this really important information. And yeah, just to reiterate, that some of the conversation on the chat is that we will be sharing some of these slides to those who attended this event. So you'll have all those links and all that information in one space. So really appreciate both Maria and Mary for your time, but also putting together these really great informative slides. And I know the audience definitely wants to look through those for resources. So now that we are at the question portion of our event today, we can do questions two ways. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat.